Admiral Kethvar stood on the command deck of his flagship and stared at the small human vessel that had appeared in the middle of their fleet review. In his 40 years of service to the Zephyrian Empire, he had never seen anything like this situation. New species were supposed to be discovered by exploration teams in distant star systems, not appear randomly in the heart of Imperial space. The Admiral was a tall being with blue-gray skin and 4 arms that allowed him to operate multiple control stations at once. His species had evolved on a high-gravity world, and they were naturally stronger and more durable than most other races in the galaxy. Kethvar had earned his rank through decades of successful military campaigns, and he was known for his ability to handle unusual situations. The human ship was much smaller than even the smallest Zephyrian patrol vessel, and it appeared to be designed for industrial work rather than military purposes. The Admiral's sensors showed that the ship carried minimal weapons, and its hull was built for durability rather than speed or maneuverability. Everything about the vessel suggested that its crew was not expecting to encounter other intelligent life. Kethvar ordered his communications officer to establish contact with the human ship and request information about their intentions. The HFY officer was a skilled linguist who could speak dozens of different alien languages, but human speech patterns were completely new to him. It took several minutes to establish a basic translation protocol that allowed both sides to understand each other. The human captain's first transmission was completely unexpected. Instead of requesting mercy or offering surrender, Jake Morrison simply apologized for the navigation error and asked for directions to leave the system. He spoke in a casual tone as if he had accidentally walked into the wrong building rather than invaded the most heavily defended star system in the Empire. Admiral Kethvar was so surprised by this response that he did not know how to reply. According to Imperial protocol, newly discovered species were supposed to be either hostile or submissive. Hostile species would attack immediately, while submissive species would beg for mercy and offer tribute. The humans seemed to be doing neither of these things. The Admiral decided to follow standard first contact procedures and invited the human ship to dock with his flagship. He wanted to meet these strange beings in person and try to understand their motivations. Kethvar ordered his crew to prepare the main docking bay and to have security teams standing by in case the humans proved to be dangerous. Jake Morrison accepted the invitation without hesitation and piloted the Aurora's Edge toward the massive Zephyrian warship. The human captain seemed completely unaware that he was about to board one of the most powerful military vessels in the galaxy. He thanked the Admiral for his hospitality as if they were old friends meeting for dinner. The Zephyrian flagship was called the Dominion's Will, and it was over 3 kilometers long. The ship carried enough weapons to destroy small moons, and its crew numbered in the thousands. The docking bay alone was larger than most human space stations, and it could accommodate dozens of smaller vessels at the same time. Lisa Park looked out the window as their ship approached the alien vessel and marveled at its size and complexity. As a geologist, she was fascinated by the materials used in its construction. The hull appeared to be made from some kind of crystalline metal that she had never seen before, and she wondered what kind of mining operation would be needed to produce such materials. Tony Rodriguez studied the design of the alien ship's engines and propulsion systems. Even though he could not understand how they worked, he could appreciate the engineering skill that had gone into building them. The power output readings from the alien ship were far beyond anything humans had achieved, and Tony wondered what kind of fuel they used. Amy Carter monitored the communication channels and tried to learn as much as possible about Zephyrian language and communication protocols. She noticed that their hosts used multiple frequency bands simultaneously, and their language seemed to include mathematical concepts that were embedded directly into their speech patterns. Danny Walsh kept a close watch on the weapons systems of the alien ships surrounding them. His scanners detected energy readings that were off the scale compared to human weapons technology. Danny realized that even one of the smaller Zephyrian vessels could probably destroy the entire human fleet if it wanted to. The Aurora's Edge docked smoothly with the alien flagship, and Jake Morrison led his crew through the airlock into Zephyrian space. The artificial gravity was slightly heavier than Earth normal, and the air had a different chemical composition, but it was breathable for humans. The corridor they entered was enormous and decorated with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change as they moved. Admiral Kethvar met them in a ceremonial chamber that had been specially prepared for first contact situations. The room was filled with Zephyrian dignitaries, cultural experts, and military officers who had come to witness this historic moment. Elaborate displays showed the history and achievements of the Zephyrian Empire, while soft music played in the background. Jake Morrison looked around the impressive chamber and nodded politely to acknowledge the effort that had been put into the presentation. Then he checked his watch and asked how long the meeting was expected to last because his crew had work schedules to maintain. He explained that they were on a tight timeline to complete their asteroid mining survey and return to Earth. The Zephyrian officials were completely unprepared for this reaction. They had expected the humans to be either amazed by their technology and civilization or terrified by their military power. Instead, the human captain seemed mildly bored and primarily concerned about getting back to work on time. Admiral Kethvar began the formal first contact ceremony by welcoming humanity to the galactic community and offering them the protection and benefits of joining the Zephyrian Empire. He explained that the Empire controlled 12 star systems and had brought peace and prosperity to dozens of different species over the past 1,000 years. Jake Morrison listened politely to the Admiral's speech and thanked him for the generous offer. Then he explained that humans already had their own government and were not really looking to join any existing political organizations. He said it was nice to meet the Zephyrians, but humans were quite happy with their current arrangements. Lisa Park wandered away from the main group and began examining the walls and decorations of the ceremonial chamber. She was particularly interested in some crystalline formations that appeared to be both decorative and functional. Lisa pulled out a small scanner and began taking readings of the alien materials without asking permission first. A Zephyrian cultural attaché named Veltar approached Lisa and tried to explain the historical significance of the artifacts she was studying. Veltar was proud of his species' achievements and wanted to share their story with these new beings. He began describing the ancient wars that had led to the formation of the Empire. Lisa listened with half her attention while continuing to scan the alien materials. When Veltar finished his explanation, she nodded and mentioned that the crystalline structures were very interesting from a geological perspective. Then she suggested that the Zephyrians might want to try a different mining technique that could produce larger and more pure crystals. Veltar was confused by Lisa's casual response to information about galactic history and politics. He tried to explain that the artifacts represented the triumph of Zephyrian civilization over chaos and barbarism. Lisa agreed that they were very nice and offered to show Veltar some interesting rock samples from her own collection. Tony Rodriguez had found his way to a group of Zephyrian engineers and was having an animated discussion about power distribution systems. The aliens were amazed that Tony could understand their technical diagrams, even though human technology was supposedly much more primitive. Tony was enjoying the conversation and sharing ideas about improving engine efficiency. Amy Carter was talking to Zephyrian communication specialists about signal processing and data compression techniques. She had discovered that human and Zephyrian communication methods had some interesting similarities, despite having evolved independently. Amy was taking notes about new techniques she could implement on the Aurora's edge. Danny Walsh stood near the entrance to the chamber and kept watch for potential threats. He was impressed by the security measures in place, but he also noticed several weaknesses in their defensive positions. Danny wondered if the Zephyrians had become overconfident due to their technological superiority. Admiral Kethvar was growing, increasingly frustrated with the humans' lack of proper respect for imperial power and authority. He decided to demonstrate the Empire's military capabilities by showing them holographic displays of conquered worlds and advanced weapon systems. The Admiral expected this demonstration to make the humans more cooperative. Jake Morrison watched the military demonstration with mild interest and complimented the quality of the holographic projectors. He mentioned that humans used similar technology for geological surveys and entertainment purposes. When the Admiral showed them planet-destroying weapons, Jake asked if they were environmentally friendly and suggested that asteroid mining was probably more sustainable. Emperor Zarketh received the urgent message from Admiral Kethvar while he was reviewing planetary production reports in his private study. The Emperor was the supreme ruler of the Zephyrian Empire, and he had not personally handled a first contact situation in over 20 years. Most new species were dealt with by military commanders and diplomatic specialists who followed well-established protocols. The Emperor was over 200 years old, which was considered middle-aged for his species. He had inherited the throne from his father and had spent his entire life learning how to govern a vast interstellar empire. Zarketh was known for his wisdom and patience, but he was also capable of decisive action when the situation required it. The message from Admiral Kethvar was highly unusual and disturbing. According to the report, these humans had appeared in Imperial space without warning and were behaving in ways that made no sense according to established xenological theory. The Admiral requested immediate guidance because standard first contact procedures were not working. Emperor Zarketh decided to travel to the fleet review location and meet these humans in person. He had dealt with dozens of different alien species during his reign, and he was confident that he could handle any situation that arose. The Emperor ordered his personal transport prepared and assembled a team of his most trusted advisors and specialists. The Imperial transport was one of the most advanced ships in the Zephyrian fleet, and it could travel between star systems in a matter of hours rather than days. The ship was equipped with the finest technology available, and its crew consisted of the elite guard who had sworn personal loyalty to the Emperor himself. While traveling to meet the humans, Emperor Zarketh reviewed all available information about their species and their unexpected arrival. The initial scans of their ship showed technology that was both primitive and sophisticated in unexpected ways. Their vessel appeared to be designed for mining operations rather than exploration or military purposes. The Emperor's cultural specialists had analyzed the limited communication exchanges with the humans and concluded that their society was probably based on individual enterprise rather than centralized authority. This would explain their lack of proper respect for imperial power, but it also suggested that they might be difficult to negotiate with as a unified group. Emperor Zarketh arrived at the fleet review location and transferred to Admiral Kethvar's flagship, where the humans were being hosted. The Admiral briefed him on the situation and explained that standard diplomatic approaches had produced no useful results. The humans seemed genuinely uninterested in imperial offers and appeared to be primarily concerned with returning to their mining operations. The Emperor decided to meet with the humans in the most impressive throne room aboard the flagship. The chamber was designed to overwhelm visitors with its size and grandeur, while demonstrating the power and authority of the Zephyrian Empire. Holographic displays showed the extent of imperial territory and the achievements of Zephyrian civilization. Jake Morrison and his crew were escorted to the throne room by a full honor guard wearing ceremonial armor and carrying traditional weapons. The procession was intended to emphasize the importance of the occasion and the respect being shown to the human visitors. Musicians played ancient imperial anthems, while hundreds of courtiers and officials lined the corridor. The human captain looked around with mild interest at the elaborate ceremony, but seemed more concerned about the time it was taking than impressed by the display of imperial power. Jake checked his watch again and mentioned to Admiral Kethvar that they really did need to get back to work soon, because their mining permits had expiration dates. Emperor Zarketh sat on his throne wearing the traditional robes of office and the crown that had been worn by Zephyrian rulers for over 1,000 years. The throne itself was carved from a single piece of crystal that had been mined from the core of a dead planet, and it was considered one of the most valuable artifacts in the Empire. When the humans entered the throne room, Jake Morrison looked up at the Emperor and nodded politely, as if he was meeting a business associate rather than the supreme ruler of a galactic empire. The captain did not bow or show any of the deference that was normally expected from visitors to the imperial court. Emperor Zarketh began the formal audience by welcoming the humans to his empire and explaining the honor that was being bestowed upon them. He described the long history of Zephyrian civilization and the benefits that membership in the Empire could provide to humanity. The Emperor spoke in the ancient formal language that was traditionally used for state occasions. Jake Morrison listened respectfully to the Emperor's speech and thanked him for his time and hospitality. Then the captain explained that humans appreciated the offer, but they were quite happy with their current political arrangements. He mentioned that Earth had its own government and humans were not looking to change their citizenship status. The Emperor was surprised by this casual rejection of imperial membership. Most species either eagerly accepted the benefits of joining the Empire or were forced to accept after military conquest. The humans seemed to be politely declining, as if they had been offered a magazine subscription rather than membership in one of the most powerful organizations in the galaxy. Emperor Zarketh decided to demonstrate imperial power by showing the humans holographic recordings of previous military campaigns. The displays showed Zephyrian fleets conquering worlds and bringing order to chaotic star systems. The Emperor explained that the Empire had the capability to destroy or protect entire civilizations depending on their level of cooperation. Jake Morrison watched the military demonstrations with the same polite attention he had shown to everything else. When the Emperor finished his presentation, the captain complimented the quality of the holographic technology and mentioned that humans used similar systems for training simulations and entertainment purposes. Tony Rodriguez raised his hand and asked a technical question about the power requirements for the holographic projectors. He was genuinely interested in the engineering aspects of the technology and wanted to know how the Zephyrians had solved certain energy distribution problems that human engineers still struggled with. The Emperor's technical advisors were happy to discuss their achievements and began explaining the principles behind their advanced holographic systems. Tony listened carefully and made several suggestions for improvements that could increase efficiency and reduce power consumption. The Zephyrian engineers were impressed by Tony's understanding of complex technical concepts. Lisa Park had wandered over to examine the crystal throne and was taking readings with her geological scanner. She was fascinated by the unusual properties of the crystal and the techniques that had been used to shape it. Lisa asked the Emperor if she could take a small sample for analysis and offered to share her findings with Zephyrian scientists. Emperor Zarketh was shocked by the casual way Lisa was treating one of the most sacred artifacts in the Empire. The throne had been touched by dozens of emperors over the centuries, and it was considered too precious to be handled by anyone except members of the imperial family. Lisa's request to take a sample was completely unprecedented. Amy Carter was having a conversation with the Emperor's communication specialists about interstellar messaging systems. She had discovered that Zephyrian communication technology was much faster than human systems, but it was also more complex and energy-intensive. Amy suggested some modifications that could improve reliability while reducing operating costs. Danny Walsh stood near the entrance to the throne room and observed the security arrangements. He was impressed by the number of guards and the sophistication of their weapons, but he also noticed that their defensive positions were designed to protect against conventional attacks rather than unconventional threats. Emperor Zarketh made one final attempt to impress the humans by offering them territorial grants within the Empire. He explained that humans could be given their own planets to govern as long as they acknowledged imperial authority and paid appropriate taxes. The Emperor presented this as a generous offer that few species had ever received. Jake Morrison thanked the Emperor for the offer, but explained that humans already had plenty of planets and were not looking to acquire more territory. He mentioned that Earth was quite comfortable, and humans had established colonies in several other star systems that met their current needs. The Emperor's advisors whispered urgently among themselves about the implications of this statement. If humans already controlled multiple star systems, then they represented a much larger civilization than had been initially assumed. The fact that they had achieved interstellar colonization without any contact with the galactic community was deeply disturbing. Emperor Zarketh asked Jake Morrison to provide more details about human territory and population. The captain answered honestly that humans had colonies in about 30 star systems and a total population of several billion people. He mentioned this information casually as if he was discussing the weather, rather than revealing the existence of a major interstellar civilization. The imperial court fell silent as the implications of this revelation became. News of the human encounter spread through the Zephyrian Empire faster than anyone had expected. Within hours of the meeting in the throne room, every military base, government office, and civilian communication network was buzzing with rumors and speculation about the strange visitors who had appeared in imperial space. The official Imperial News Service tried to control the information flow by releasing carefully worded statements about a routine first contact with a minor species. However, leaked recordings of the throne room meeting began circulating through unofficial channels, and the truth about human capabilities became impossible to hide. Commander Velkari was stationed on a frontier outpost near the edge of Imperial space when she received the classified briefing about the human encounter. She had spent 15 years defending the Empire's borders against pirates and hostile alien raids. Velkari was known for her tactical skills and her loyalty to Imperial ideals. The briefing materials included sensor readings from the human ship and transcripts of their conversations with Imperial officials. Velkari studied the information carefully and found herself questioning many of her basic assumptions about civilization and military power. The humans seemed to have achieved everything the Empire valued without any of the conquest and domination that Zephyrians considered necessary. Velkari's second-in-command was a young officer named Keth Tal, who had graduated from the Imperial Military Academy with highest honors. He was eager to advance his career and had always believed that the Empire's expansion was bringing peace and order to the galaxy. The human revelations challenged everything he had been taught about inferior species and the necessity of imperial control. The two officers discussed the implications of the human encounter during their regular patrol duties. Kethatal argued that the humans must be lying about their capabilities because no species could control 30 star systems without a massive military organization. Velkari was less certain and pointed out that human technology seemed genuinely different from anything the Empire had encountered. Meanwhile, on the capital world, Emperor Zarketh was meeting with his intelligence chiefs and military advisors to plan their response to the human situation. The Emperor had ordered comprehensive reconnaissance missions to gather more information about human space and assess potential threats or opportunities. Intelligence Director Morveth was responsible for gathering information about alien civilizations throughout the galaxy. He had extensive files on dozens of different species, but humans were completely absent from Imperial records. This suggested that humanity had developed faster than light travel and established interstellar colonies without any contact with known galactic civilizations. The director's analysis team had been working around the clock to study every piece of available data about the human encounter. Their preliminary conclusions were disturbing because they suggested that human civilization was organized along completely different principles than any known society in the galaxy. Dr. Zelandra was the Empire's leading expert on alien psychology and social structures. She had studied the behavioral patterns of conquered species for over 30 years and had developed theories about the relationship between technology and political organization. The human data challenged all of her established models. According to Dr. Zelandra's analysis, humans appeared to operate as independent groups that cooperated voluntarily rather than through centralized authority. This type of organization should not be able to coordinate large-scale projects like interstellar colonization, yet the humans had clearly achieved exactly that. The doctor's report suggested that human society might be fundamentally more efficient than imperial systems because it eliminated the overhead costs of maintaining large bureaucratic and military hierarchies. If this analysis was correct, then the Empire's entire approach to governance and expansion might be obsolete. Back on the frontier, Outpost Commander Velkari received new orders from Imperial headquarters. She was instructed to increase patrols along the border and watch for any signs of human activity in nearby star systems. The orders also included strict instructions to avoid contact with human vessels and to report any sightings immediately. Velkari found these orders troubling because they seemed to be based on fear rather than rational military planning. If humans really controlled 30 star systems, then they probably had exploration and patrol vessels throughout the region. Avoiding contact would be difficult and might even be interpreted as hostile behavior by human commanders. The commander decided to call a meeting with her senior staff to discuss the new situation and develop appropriate response protocols. She invited her security chief, communications officer, and tactical specialist to review the available intelligence and make recommendations. Security Chief Targotha had 20 years of experience in military intelligence and counter-terrorism operations. He was skeptical of the human claims and believed that they were probably exaggerating their capabilities to intimidate the Empire. Targotha recommended aggressive reconnaissance to determine the true extent of human territory and military strength. Communications. Officer Lithivera had studied xenolinguistics at the Imperial University and was fascinated by the human communication patterns that had been recorded during their visit. She noted that human language included concepts and assumptions that were completely foreign to Zephyrian thinking. Lithivera suggested that cultural differences might be more significant than military capabilities. Tactical specialist Jorvek was responsible for analyzing potential threats and developing defensive strategies. His preliminary assessment of human technology suggested that their ships were designed for efficiency and reliability rather than maximum combat capability. However, Jorvek noted that human defensive systems included several innovations that could be highly effective against Imperial weapons. The staff meeting lasted several hours and produced more questions than answers. Everyone agreed that humans represented something unprecedented in galactic politics, but nobody could predict how the situation would develop. Commander Velkari decided to prepare for multiple scenarios while hoping that diplomacy would prevent any military confrontation. On other worlds throughout the Empire, similar discussions were taking place as military commanders, government officials, and civilian leaders tried to understand what the human encounter meant for their future. The revelation that a major interstellar civilization had developed without Imperial knowledge was forcing everyone to reconsider their assumptions about galactic politics. Governor Meth Kara ruled a mining world that provided rare metals for Imperial shipbuilding projects. She had always been proud of her planet's contribution to Imperial expansion and had never questioned the Empire's right to control interstellar trade. The human revelations made her wonder whether voluntary cooperation might be more effective than Imperial taxation and regulation. Professor Velthara taught galactic history at the Imperial University and had written several books about the Empire's role in bringing civilization to primitive worlds. She was now faced with evidence that an advanced civilization had developed completely independently and seemed to be more successful than the Empire in many ways. The professor's students were asking difficult questions about imperial ideology and the necessity of conquest for technological progress. Velthara found herself unable to provide satisfactory answers because the human example contradicted everything she had taught about the relationship between military power and civilizational advancement. In the imperial capital city, millions of citizens were discussing the human encounter and its implications for their daily lives. Many people had relatives serving in the military or working in government positions related to imperial expansion. The possibility that expansion might not be necessary or even beneficial was deeply unsettling to a society that had been built around conquest and domination. Economic analysts were particularly concerned about the long-term implications of human competition. If humans could achieve technological advancement and resource extraction without the massive military and bureaucratic expenses that the Empire required, then they might be able to offer better prices for manufactured goods and raw materials. Emperor Zarketh was receiving reports from throughout the Empire about declining morale and increasing questions about imperial policies. Some military commanders were requesting permission to establish peaceful contact with human colonies, while others were advocating for preemptive strikes to eliminate the potential threat. The Emperor realized that the human encounter had created a crisis that went far beyond military or diplomatic concerns. The very foundations of imperial society were being questioned by citizens who had never doubted the superiority of their civilization before meeting these casual miners from Earth. Intelligence. Reports were beginning to arrive from reconnaissance missions sent to investigate human space. The preliminary findings confirmed that human claims about controlling 30 star systems were accurate, and that their civilization was indeed much larger than anyone had initially believed. Even more disturbing was the discovery that human space included several star systems that the Empire had been planning to colonize in the 3 weeks after the human encounter. Emperor Zarketh sat in his private study reviewing intelligence reports that painted an increasingly complex picture of the situation. The reconnaissance missions he had authorized were returning with data that challenged everything the Empire thought it knew about galactic civilization and the nature of political power. The intelligence reports confirmed that human space was indeed much larger than the Zephyrian Empire and was organized in ways that made no sense according to imperial political theory. Instead of a centralized government controlling everything, from a capital world, humans seemed to operate as loosely connected independent colonies that cooperated when it benefited them. Admiral Kethavar had submitted a detailed analysis of the human ship and its crew based on his personal observations during their visit. The Admiral noted that the humans showed no signs of military discipline or fear of authority, yet they operated their vessel with impressive efficiency and competence. Their casual attitude seemed to be genuine rather than a calculated psychological warfare tactic. The Emperor's economic advisors were particularly concerned about the implications of human mining and manufacturing capabilities. If humans could extract resources and produce goods more efficiently than imperial corporations, then they could potentially dominate interstellar trade without firing a single shot. Economic conquest might be more devastating than military defeat. Dr. Zelandra had completed her comprehensive analysis of human social structures and submitted a report that read like science fiction rather than serious academic research. According to her findings, human civilization had somehow achieved all the benefits of imperial organization, while avoiding most of the costs and inefficiencies that plagued centralized governments. The doctor's report suggested that humans had solved problems that imperial scholars had considered impossible to address. They had apparently eliminated most forms of corruption, waste, and bureaucratic inefficiency while maintaining high levels of technological advancement and social cooperation. If these findings were accurate, then the Empire's entire approach to governance was obsolete. Emperor Zarketh was also receiving disturbing reports from military commanders throughout the Empire about declining morale and increasing questions about the necessity of imperial expansion. Many officers were beginning to wonder why they were fighting to conquer primitive worlds when humans had achieved greater success through peaceful development. Commander Velkari had submitted a request for permission to establish peaceful contact with human colonies near her frontier outpost. She argued that cooperation with humans might be more beneficial than avoiding them, and that military confrontation would probably be disastrous given their apparent technological capabilities. Other commanders were making similar requests as they realized that human space surrounded much of the imperial frontier. Attempting to maintain hostile relations with such a large and advanced civilization would require massive military expenditures that the Empire could not afford while continuing its expansion programs. The Emperor was also dealing with political pressure from planetary governors who were demanding explanations for decades of policies that now seemed to be based on false assumptions. If humans could achieve prosperity and security without imperial protection, then why were imperial worlds required to pay taxes and provide military service? Governor Methkara had submitted a formal petition requesting permission to establish direct trade relations with human colonies. She argued that her mining world could benefit significantly from human technology and markets while reducing its dependence on imperial bureaucracy and regulation. Similar petitions were arriving from other worlds throughout the Empire as local leaders realized that human civilization offered alternatives to imperial control that had never been available before. The Emperor was facing the possibility of peaceful secession by planets that no longer saw any benefit in remaining under imperial authority. Professor Velthera had published a series of academic papers questioning the fundamental assumptions of imperial ideology and suggesting that voluntary cooperation might be more effective than conquest for achieving technological and social progress. Her work was being widely read and discussed throughout the Empire. The professor's students were organizing debate clubs and discussion groups to explore alternatives to imperial governance based on the human model. These activities were not illegal, but they were certainly subversive because they challenged the basic principles that justified imperial authority. Emperor Zarketh realized that he was facing a crisis that could not be resolved through traditional military or diplomatic means. The human encounter had revealed fundamental weaknesses in imperial society that would continue to cause problems regardless of any specific policies he might adopt. The emperor's advisors were divided about the best response to the situation. Some recommended aggressive action to eliminate the human threat before it could destabilize the empire further. Others suggested that accommodation and cooperation might be the only viable long-term strategy. Intelligence Director Morveth had developed detailed plans for covert operations against human colonies, including sabotage, assassination, and false flag attacks designed to provoke military conflicts. He argued that humans represented an existential threat to imperial survival that could only be addressed through decisive action. Foreign Minister Kolvasha disagreed and recommended immediate diplomatic contact to establish formal relations with human authorities. She pointed out that military action against a civilization that controlled 30 star systems would probably result in imperial defeat and the collapse of Zephyrian government. The emperor spent days considering his options, while reports continued to arrive about increasing unrest and questioning throughout the empire. He finally decided that the safest course was to allow the humans to leave peacefully while secretly monitoring their activities and preparing for various contingencies. Emperor Zarketh authorized Jake Morrison and his crew to depart Imperial space with an official escort to ensure their safe passage to the border. The Emperor wanted to avoid any incidents that might provoke retaliation from human authorities, while he developed a comprehensive strategy for dealing with this unprecedented situation. Jake Morrison was relieved to finally receive departure clearance and thanked the Emperor for his hospitality and patience. The captain seemed completely unaware that his brief visit had caused a political crisis that was threatening the stability of an entire galactic empire. The crew of the Aurora's Edge returned to their ship and prepared for the journey back to human space. They had collected some interesting geological samples and made contact with a fascinating alien civilization, but they were eager to complete their original mission and return home to their families. Lisa Park was excited about the opportunity to study Zephyrian crystal samples and compare them to similar formations she had found in human space. She planned to write several research papers about her discoveries and hoped to establish ongoing scientific cooperation with Zephyrian geologists. Tony Rodriguez had learned several new engineering techniques during his conversations with Zephyrian technicians and was looking forward to implementing some improvements on the Aurora's Edge. He had also given the aliens some suggestions for upgrading their power systems that might improve efficiency and reduce operating costs. Amy Carter had recorded extensive data about Zephyrian communication protocols and was planning to develop better translation software for future contact with alien civilizations. She had established friendly relationships with several Zephyrian specialists who had promised to share additional technical information. Danny Walsh was satisfied that the encounter had ended peacefully, but he remained concerned about the potential for future conflicts between humans and the Zephyrian Empire. He planned to submit a detailed security report when they returned to Earth with recommendations for defensive preparations. The Aurora's Edge left Imperial space under escort from a squadron of Zephyrian patrol vessels that accompanied them to the border. Jake Morrison waved goodbye to his escorts and set course for the asteroid field where they had originally been heading before their navigation error. Emperor Zarketh watched the human ship disappear on his sensors and wondered what the future would bring. The brief encounter had revealed that the galaxy was much larger and more complex than anyone had realized, and that the Zephyrian Empire was not as powerful or important as they had always believed. The Emperor knew that the human encounter was just the beginning of a process that would fundamentally change galactic civilization. Other species would eventually learn about human capabilities and begin questioning their own relationships with established powers, like the Zephyrian Empire. 6 months later, Jake Morrison submitted his mission report to Earth Colonial Administration, noting that they had encountered some local traffic control issues during their asteroid survey, but had successfully completed their mineral extraction objectives. The report was filed under routine administrative matters and forgotten within a week. The rare earth metals collected during their mission were processed and distributed to various manufacturing facilities throughout human space. Admiral Jake Morrison stood at the massive viewing window of Nexus Prime Station and watched 12 human ships slowly approach the docking bays. The ships looked old and simple compared to the hundreds of alien vessels already parked around the giant space station. Morrison knew exactly how his fleet appeared to the watching aliens, and that was exactly what he wanted. Captain Amy Powell walked up beside him and handed him a data pad. "The final ship roster, sir," she said quietly. "All 12 vessels are ready for inspection." Morrison took the pad and smiled slightly. The USS Defiance led the small human fleet, followed by 11 other ships that looked like metal boxes with engines attached. They had no smooth curves like the bioships of the Korthak Empire. They did not glow with inner light like the crystal vessels of the Etherian Federation. They just looked like basic metal ships that humans had been building for centuries. "Perfect," Morrison said. "Let them look. Let them laugh. Let them think we are still playing with primitive toys." Powell nodded. She had been with Morrison for 3 years and understood the plan. Every dent and scratch on the human ships was carefully planned. Every outdated-looking antenna and simple hull design was part of a bigger game. The aliens would see exactly what humans wanted them to see. The docking process took 2 hours. Morrison watched as alien crews gathered at viewing ports to stare at the human ships. He could see them pointing and making gestures that probably meant they were laughing. Some aliens took pictures with their recording devices. Others just shook their heads in what looked like pity. "Admiral Voss is requesting a meeting," Powell said, checking her communication device. "He wants to tour one of our ships." Morrison almost laughed. Zektar Voss was the military commander of the Korthak Empire, and he was known throughout the galaxy for his pride and arrogance. The reptilian alien thought his bioships were the most advanced vessels in space. He probably wanted to see how primitive human technology really was. "Tell him he can tour the Defiance in 1 hour," Morrison said. "Make sure Captain Torres knows to give him the full show." An hour later, Morrison and Powell met Voss at the airlock of the USS Defiance. The Korthak admiral was 8 feet tall with dark green scales and yellow eyes. He wore a military uniform covered in medals and rank symbols. Behind him came 2 smaller Korthak officers who carried recording equipment. "Admiral Morrison," Voss said in heavily accented English. "I am curious to see how humans build their warships. My scientists tell me your technology is very interesting." Morrison knew that Voss meant interesting in a bad way. "We are honored by your visit, Admiral Voss. Please come aboard." Captain Ryan Torres met them inside the ship. Torres was a young human with dark hair and calm eyes. He had been briefed on exactly what to show the alien visitors and what to keep hidden. "Welcome to the Defiance," Torres said. "She may not look like much, but she has served us well." Voss looked around the ship's bridge and snorted. The control panels looked old and simple. The screens were basic displays that showed simple readouts. Everything appeared to be built with primitive technology that was centuries behind what other species used. "This is your main computer?" Voss asked, pointing at a large metal box with blinking lights. "Yes, sir," Torres replied. "She processes about 10,000 calculations per second." One of the Korthak officers made a noise that sounded like laughter. Voss himself smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "My personal data pad can process more than that," he said. "How do you fight battles with such limited systems?" Torres shrugged. "We do our best with what we have, sir. Human engineering focuses on reliability over speed." They toured the weapon systems next. Torres showed them the missile launchers that looked like simple metal tubes. He demonstrated the laser cannons that seemed to be basic focused light beams. Everything appeared to be built with old technology that was no match for advanced alien weapons. "Your missiles have chemical propulsion," Voss observed. "Do you not have plasma drive technology?" "We are still working on that," Morrison said. "Human science advances slowly, but we are learning from our galactic neighbors." Voss and his officers spent 3 hours examining the ship. They looked at the engine room with its simple fusion reactors. They studied the basic life support systems and the primitive communication arrays. By the time they finished, all 3 Korthak were barely containing their amusement. "Thank you for the tour," Voss said as they prepared to leave. "It has been very educational. I had no idea that humans were still using such basic technology." Morrison nodded politely. "We appreciate your interest in our ships, Admiral. Perhaps someday we will build vessels as advanced as yours." After the Korthak left, Powell looked at Morrison with concern. "Do you think we overdid it?" Voss seemed almost insulted by how primitive we appeared. Morrison smiled. "That was exactly the reaction we wanted. Now he will go back to his fleet and tell everyone that humans are no threat to anyone. He will report that our ships are barely capable of defending themselves, let alone attacking other civilizations." The next day brought the main military assessment conference. Representatives from 47 different species gathered in the massive central hall of Nexus Prime. Morrison sat at the human table with Powell and 3 other Earth officers. Around them, aliens of every shape and size discussed military, technology, and fleet capabilities. High Commander Lyra Stellanis of the Etherian Federation stood to address the assembly. She was tall and elegant, with crystal-like skin that reflected light in beautiful patterns. Her voice carried clearly through the hall as she spoke about the latest advances in energy shielding and faster-than-light travel. "The Etherian fleet now numbers over 3,000 vessels," she announced. "Each ship is equipped with quantum processors and multi-dimensional weapon systems. We continue to push the boundaries of what is possible in space warfare." The assembled aliens murmured their approval. Many species had trade agreements with the Etherians and respected their advanced technology. When Stellanis finished her presentation, she looked directly at Morrison and smiled politely. "I understand the human fleet has also grown recently," she said. "Perhaps Admiral Morrison would like to share details about Earth's military progress." Morrison stood slowly and activated a holographic display. Images of the 12 human ships appeared above the table, rotating slowly for everyone to see. The reaction was immediate. Laughter erupted from dozens of different species. Some aliens pointed at the simple-looking vessels and made comments in their own languages that clearly indicated amusement. Voss stood up from the Korthak table. "My friends," he said loudly, I had the pleasure of touring one of these magnificent human vessels yesterday. I can assure you that Earth's military represents no threat to anyone in this galaxy. Their computers are slower than our children's toys. Their weapons are barely capable of destroying asteroids. Their ships are held together with metal bolts and primitive welding. More laughter filled the hall. Morrison stood quietly and let the aliens enjoy their amusement. Powell shifted uncomfortably beside him, but Morrison remained calm and patient. The human fleet consists of 12 vessels, Morrison said when the laughter died down. We understand that this is not impressive compared to the mighty fleets represented here today. Earth is still learning and growing. We hope to someday build ships worthy of this great galactic community. Stellanis nodded sympathetically. I am sure humans will continue to advance, she said. Perhaps in a few centuries, Earth will develop technology that can contribute meaningfully to galactic defense. The conference continued for 2 more days. Morrison listened as alien admirals discussed battle strategies and military alliances. None of them included humans in their planning. Most barely acknowledged that Earth had any military capability at all. When the final votes were taken about upcoming joint defense exercises, humanity was excluded from participation. The human fleet is too small and primitive to participate in serious military operations, Voss announced during the closing session. Perhaps they can provide supply ships or transport vessels for support roles. Morrison accepted the decision gracefully. We understand our limitations, he said. Earth is honored to serve the galactic community in whatever capacity we can. As the conference ended and aliens began departing Nexus Prime, Powell finally spoke her mind. Admiral, that was humiliating. They treated us like children playing with toy ships. Morrison watched the alien fleets departing through the viewing window. Massive bioships of the Korthak stretched nearly 2 miles long. Crystalline Etherian vessels sparkled like jewels as they moved through space. Dozens of other alien designs demonstrated technology that seemed centuries ahead of human capabilities. Let them think what they want, Morrison said quietly. Pride comes before the fall, and these aliens have more pride than sense. They see our ships and think they know everything about human capabilities. Powell looked confused. But, sir, those really are our capabilities. The Defiance and our other ships are exactly what they appear to be. Morrison smiled and turned away from the window. Are they, Captain? Are you absolutely certain about that?